Hi everyone, it's John. Happy Tuesday. I have another book review for you. Sorry I missed last week, tax week and all of that stuff. But I have a book review I want to a book I want to talk about and review. I read it a while back. I think I actually read it during Black History Month, but only recently got the chance to actually review it. And it is Zora Neale Hurston's most famous book, Their Eyes Were Watching God. I think everyone's heard of it. Everyone knows, or at least knows of, Zora Neale Hurston. And there's probably 50 reviews on YouTube of this book. So the degree to which I'll be telling you something you don't know or is new to you might vary with your personal mileage. However, I do have one thing to say before I start the review. If you have not read the novel or have not made it all the way to the end, I will be spoiling some plot points. So if you are heavily invested in finding out what happens towards the middle and end of the novel, stop me, pause me, come back later once you've finished, and then come and listen to the review. Or read it, which you can always do at the link that I leave below to my Goodreads account. If there's anything that could rightly be called a sort of prototypical or first African-American feminist classic, Their Eyes Were Watching God could probably be called that, the first of its kind. It's part Bildungsroman and part romance that tells the story of a woman named Janie and her three major romantic relationships or entanglements in a novel-length episodic flashback that is told to her friend Phoebe. Her first marriage, and the first part of my review will be that sort of summary of the major plot points where I might give away some things you don't want to know yet. Her first marriage is to a man named Logan, who is sort of an unappreciative oaf-like guy, who essentially sees her as nothing more than just a domestic workhorse. She leaves him for someone named Joe Starks, who takes her to Eatonville in Florida, which is actually the same Florida town that Zora Neale Hurston actually grew up in as a child. Establishes a successful general store, and then Joe actually becomes elected mayor of the city. But it becomes increasingly clear that Joe only wants to see her as a trophy of his own success and maybe even a bit of arm candy. Someone to prop up his already pretty well inflated sense of self. So Zora Neale Hurston kills Joe off in due course with a kidney ailment, which is, of course, 80 years ago would have been pretty much a terminal condition. But not before we find out that Janie's entanglement in Joe's general store and the way she helped run the store has actually made her pretty much financially independent and maybe even borderline wealthy. Joe's kidney disease allows for the entree of lover number 3, whose name is Tea Cake. And this is really the major romantic figure for the rest of the novel, and for the as far as the novel's length goes. Tea Cake seems to be the most promising of the 3 by far. He expresses genuine love and care for Janie, at least compared to the other 2. But their relationship is still fraught with its own ups and downs, including at least one episode in which Tea Cake actually physically abuses Janie. During a hurricane, here's the big spoiler. So if you haven't stopped me by now, pause. During a hurricane, Tea Cake is bitten by a rabid dog, and as his behavior starts to grow more and more erratic, one day he attempts to shoot Jeannie, but because of the muscular loss of control he has because he has rabies, he doesn't quite manage to reach for the gun in an efficient way. She gets at it first. She shoots him and kills him. She's charged with murder, of course. She was guilty of it after all, but a contingent of white women in the community come to the trial to testify in her defense, and she's found not guilty. At this point, the story basically ends, and the reader is reminded once again that the whole thing has just been, like I mentioned earlier, a narrative flashback to Janie's friend Phoebe. I had one major problem with the novel, and I think it was one largely of expectations and anticipation. Having read novels by other very talented black women, and the one that most came to mind was Toni Morrison. I wanted Janie to be like one of those women. I wanted her to be strong, independent, assertive, able to do things on her own, not measure her own worth up against a man or her relatives or her children or anything else. Of course, there's really no way that someone could have drawn a black woman like that in 1937, which is when this novel was published. It's 82 years old this year. It's clear from the plot of the book that Janie continually measures her own sense of self-worth in relationships to the men that she's with. Or just simply her own sense of self-worth to the men that she's with. In fact, this might be her fatal flaw. But it's equally clear that I think Zora Neale Hurston, the anthropologist, the sociologist, and maybe the commentator on racial relations, is trying to maybe say something about the unique ways that black women, especially black Southern women, remember this is taking place in Florida, have been conditioned because of their relationships with overbearing, patriarchal, often physically violent men. I don't know if this is quite the same criticism that Richard Wright had. Richard Wright, the same author of Black Boy and Native Son, had of the novel when he complained that her novel wasn't political enough. He wrote the following: "The sensory sweep of her novel carries no theme, no message, no thought. Miss Hurston seems to have no desire whatsoever to move in the direction of serious fiction. Her characters eat and laugh and cry and work and kill. They swing eternally like a pendulum on that safe and narrow orbit in which America likes to see the Negro live, between laughter and tears." I don't think it is the same criticism that he's making, since novels like this one, and I would even suggest Wright's own novel, Black Boy, which I previously reviewed on this channel, make it clear that the line between the personal and the political is fuzzy and ill-defined at best. I found a lot of imagery in the novel to be beautiful, wonderful, and especially the reoccurring themes of trees and flowers in blossom, which purposefully and repetitively argue, or I should say echo, Janie's own spiritual, sexual, and moral growth. Even though that was really fun to read, it's hard to continue to have to look past the fact that Janie seemed, despite her own best, earnest, concerted efforts, to be a victim of her own circumstances instead of a master of them. This doesn't make the novel disappointing, it doesn't make it poorly written, so much as it makes it just soul-crushing and disheartening. As much as we want to be able to see her break old patterns, there are some problematic aspects about her relationships with men, which I hinted at previously, not least of which is physical violence, which make that hard, maybe even impossible. As naive and simplistic as it sounds, Janie is really someone you want to root for. But despite her relative economic success, we get the heart-rending impression that the entire story of her life has been just a big circle, that she's ended up exactly where she began, only older, but perhaps not much wiser. If you've read, or remember, or have any interest in reading again Their Eyes Were Watching God by Zora Neale Hurston, let me know. I'm always curious to hear ideas, thoughts, opinions, pontifications. I will see you next week. Bye, guys.